common ground, that's something that's already there. You just need to recognize it. This helped me navigate my life from that point. And I think our kids need that even earlier. I wish I had known that earlier, but our kids need this earlier.
Hey there, I'm Julie. Welcome to Uncomfy, a podcast about sticking with moments that challenge us. We share the stories of real people in moments that challenge their perspective. And instead of getting angry or shutting down, they stuck with the discomfort. They stayed curious and open, and they're glad they did. We hope these stories inspire you to stick with it too, because there is so much to gain. New empathy, deeper relationships, more clarity about our own views. I'm glad you're here. Now, let's get uncomfy. Here's a story about spending a day with a group that thinks you hate them. I'm joined by Jefferson Shupe, author of The Bathwater Brigade. It's a novel about a college town divided by a racial tragedy and students on campus struggling to find common ground. Jefferson, hi, welcome. It's great to have you.
Hello. Thanks for letting me be here, Julie.
So your book, The Bathwater Brigade, was partly inspired by the stick with it moment that you're going to share with us in just a moment. But we need a little bit of background information first. So tell us a little bit about who you are, who you were leading into this stick with it moment.
Yeah. So, as I got into college, I started paying attention into politics more. I kind of built an echo chamber around myself. I had certain voices I would listen to in the media.
Did you tend to lean more conservative, liberal?
Conservative.
Okay.
And I looked at the other side, sort of from a distance, and I couldn't understand how they would think differently than me. It just was, the only things left to me were they were dumb, or they were crazy, or they just hated America, hated me. Those were the only things I was left with. There was a great example. It was at kind of a family reunion type thing. And I was sort of the quiet one on my wife's side of the family. They're all, really loud, and I'm kind of, I kind of wait for a gap in the conversation before I jump in. And on her side, there are no gaps. So you just have to jump in. So anyway, I was just kind of listening, and the conversation turned into politics. And one of the people, kind of the elder generation that was there, started, saying a lot of opinions, and they were the wrong ones. So I couldn't just let that go.
They were wrong, meaning they weren't your opinions.
Exactly.
They were on the other side.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So I couldn't just let it go. So I jumped in, and we started going at it. So me and
So
her,
you and this in-law on your wife's side at a sort of enclosed space,
Yep.
family reunion type thing. Okay, what do you mean going at it?
So what I realized was that I had been building up pressure in my echo chamber, and everything just kind of came out. And she would say something, and I would fire back with something that was obviously completely logical, data backed, everything airtight. Or so I thought, something that seemed obvious. And so we sort of circled around each other. It went for about a half hour. I just couldn't stop. And finally it ended, and things, cautiously resumed the party. So that stuck with me, and I thought, I don't think I convinced her on anything. And she didn't convince me on anything. And so it got me, that was one thing that got me on the road to being a little more humble and curious.
Sometimes that could have had the effect of sort of sending you back to your echo chamber even more outraged, right, at the stupidity of the other side or whatever. But you say, and this is key. So this is an example of one of those things that sort of cracked you open to the possibility of a stick with it moment. Where did you go next, where you really experienced the discomfort and chose to stay in it?
Yeah. So this worked on me for a while, and I thought I wasn't giving up on my ideas, but I thought there has to be a different way maybe to persuade people. So I started to look for places that maybe a conservative wouldn't always be, and I wanted to see what they would say if they thought no conservatives were there listening.
Oh, you wanted to go undercover.
Yeah.
With what goal?
It was more of how can they really think this way, and when we're arguing, when conservatives is in front of them, I felt like maybe I didn't have quite the whole story. So there was a rally at the Capitol. It was on immigration,
Okay, state
and
capital.
yep, and I'd been following that, and I had my own thoughts, and there was going to be counter protests there, and so I thought this is a great place to just not rely on news clips. I want to be there. I want to see for myself. So I showed up. There were people on the conservative side. There were signs on both sides. One in particular on the other side. Many of them were Hispanic, not all, and they were holding up their own signs. And they were agitated. They were calling the conservatives racist, that sort of thing. And I just sort of wandered around and just tried to listen to what was being said. There's almost like an invisible line. I don't think there were like police separating people really, but there was kind of like a gap there between us as we were sort of holding signs at each other and talking, probably yelling. And I just kind of gradually came to the other side. Yeah, I was a little nervous. I didn't know how observant people were. If they'd say, "Hey, you were from that side. What are you doing?"
Okay. I mean, did you learn anything? What was that experience like for you then, just being there on the other side of the protest, right? Among the people who were yelling and
Hmm.
shouting back at your side.
During the protest, I gotta say I didn't learn too much. We were in kind of a combat mode. Both sides were, and I had heard the talking points from both sides before, and they were just being shouted louder and painted on signs, and so I didn't learn a lot in that moment. It was more of following them after and hearing the be sticking around for the after party that the real insights came from me. So everything wound down, people sort of separated, and what happened was the Hispanic group started going off. They started wandering in a specific direction altogether. So I mingled in. I wasn't the only white person among them, so it was I didn't stick out too bad. And I kind of kept my mouth shut and just walked with them.
Okay. To what end? What were you hoping would happen?
I wanted to see if there's any additional insights I could get from them for why they thought we were racist.
Huh. And did you?
I did. So what happened was they formed a circle, and the leader of the group he spoke for a minute, and he had a little bit of that same tone of those guys up there, they're racist, but the tone quickly shifted, and it was more somber of hey, buck up guys, we got this. It felt like they had a loss. I think they could see that legislation was coming, and they felt like they didn't get what they wanted that day. But there were tears. They went around the circle, each sort of expressing why they were there, what they hoped to gain. There were people there that were essentially fighting for their family. They wanted their family to be there, to have good things, have good jobs. And I realized that they wanted a lot of the same things that I want for me and my family. I started to relate to them in a big way. I felt more connected with them than not, even though we still disagreed on policy. And I mean, now that I think about it today, I don't know why it would have been surprising. It seems more obvious to me today that people generally, want the same things for each other and for their families. But yeah, at that moment, it was eye-opening.
Was there anything that you heard that was hard to hear?
I think the hardest was probably the accusations. It's hard to have like intent assigned to you when you don't feel it's true. And thinking back on it, I think they had the same problem that I did with people that thought different than me. They didn't know how someone would support that legislation unless they hated, unless they were racist. So in some ways, we were both on the same plane.
So what happened next? Did that experience change anything for you?
I'd say the biggest takeaway from that experience was I was, in a way, I was less confident in my own thoughts. I still knew what I was, what I believed, but I thought, there's more here. There's more nuance to the situation. And I felt that to be completely intellectually honest, I would need to sort of integrate that into my worldview. It took a while. That was the beginnings, but now, when there's an issue on the table, I like to get firsthand as much as I can, talk to people, especially that I know that might be on the other side of the aisle. Even if I'm confident that I support a certain direction, then I will say, well, are there other things to consider? Are there different ways we can go about it? Are there tweaks to the policy that we can make that will be maybe more just overall, maybe more fair, but still be what feels like common sense to me.
And so then how did this all relate then to writing the book, The Bathwater Brigade? And just explain the title. What's the concept?
Yeah, so there's a fictional college in Texas where there are a group of students. It's a tradition that's gone for decades. And they get together and they sort of debate issues, but their goal is to find all the perspectives that they can around an issue. And they sort of teach each other those skills of finding common ground, critical thinking, looking for nuance, that sort of thing. The whole premise is if you leave one side of the country out of the conversation, then you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So, for instance, if Republicans got into power, had all branches of government, we would still want to listen to what the other side has to say. We want to hear out their perspective to integrate that. Not everything, they're obviously, if you lost an election, you're not going to be calling the shots. But I think we would be wise to take advantage of people who do think differently because they can enhance us and get us to better places.
When did it come to you, like, maybe I'll write a book about these ideas?
It came when my oldest daughter was up for graduating high school. And I had one of those panic moments as a dad, like, does she know everything she needs to know to, like, go out into the world? And I just got introspective. I thought, well, the biggest thing for me, it was the skill, the how and the why of finding common ground with someone that thinks totally opposite you. Realizing that doesn't mean you have to compromise all the time. You don't have to, give up part of what you believe to get something done. That's not what that means. Common ground, that's something that's already there. You just need to recognize it. And this helped me navigate my life from that point. And I think our kids need that even earlier. I wish I had known that earlier, but our kids need this earlier.
So have young people read the book? What kind of reaction are you getting from the Bathwater Brigade?
Yeah, there's been a lot of young people. My own kids have read it. Even my youngest, he was, I think, like 12 at the time. I thought he might have been a little bit too young to get the concepts, and I quizzed him, and he got them all. I was really impressed. I've had people, readers, adults as well. They say it sticks with them, and they come back to the concepts in life. That's a really rewarding thing to hear as an author.
Well, listen, Jefferson, thank you so much for taking time today. I really appreciate you chatting with me and sharing your story.
Well, thank you.
Jefferson Shupe is the author of The Bathwater Brigade. You can learn more and get your own copy at bathwaterbrigade.com. I highly recommend it. Thanks for getting uncomfy with us today. I'd love to hear about a stick with it moment you've had recently. Maybe we'll even feature you on the podcast. You can drop a line to uncomfy@byu.edu. And while you're at it, be sure to check out my other podcast. It's called Top of Mind, where we explore tough topics in a way that can help us to practice staying open and curious when facing challenging perspectives. So Top of Mind's a great companion to Uncomfy. You can find it on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple. Uncomfy is a BYU radio podcast. Samuel Benson produces it, and the team includes Enrique Prado, James Hoops, Sam Payne, and Brendan Lewis. Our theme music was composed by Kelsey Ney. I'm Julie Rose. Can't wait to get uncomfy with you again next week. Hey friends, if you are on the lookout for another awesome podcast, check out Constant Wonder. It's also from the BYU Radio Network. It's hosted by my friend Marcus Smith, and it is like embarking on an exhilarating journey through captivating stories about our magnificent natural world. As you listen, you'll gain profound insights into different facets of our planet. You'll discover more about nature. I've learned about whales and bees and nematodes from listening to Constant Wonder. And you might even find yourself pondering your own connection to the wonders of this earth. So, wherever you usually get your podcast, do yourself a favor and go check out Constant Wonder from BYU Radio.